there's assets to his game that you can go out and you can get for cheaper. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. I'm your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about Deandre Ayton. So, some interesting news came out here as the start of preseason has started to get going and stuff, and that is that the Suns don't want to pay Ayton. Now, that's it, very simplified. If I read the report from Woj, it says Ayton is a key part of the Suns' run to the 2021 NBA Finals and has no intention of accepting a deal less than a comparable max contract that several of his 2018 NBA draft classmates signed, including Trae Young, Luka and Trae, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Michael Porter Jr. And prior to that, he tweeted out, ESPN sources the Phoenix Suns reluctant to offer a maximum rookie contract extension to former number 1 overall pick Deandre Ayton has stalled discussions on a deal. So, super interesting report to come out earlier today, and really didn't kind of take off. I know some people kind of talked about it, but this could have some big ramifications, especially for the Suns, a team that just went to the finals, and this could be very interesting on how this shapes them forward. So if we look at what Ayton did or has done in his career, so in his rookie season, he played 71 games and averaged 16.3 points per game. In his sophomore season, he played only 38 games, obviously shortened season and stuff, but he averaged 18.2 points per game. And then in this last season, he averaged 14.4 points per game and played a total of 69 games. That's pretty nice. Now when we look towards his playoffs, this last season, when they made the run to the finals, it's not going to give me averages, I guess. But he played all 22 games and had a total of 347 points. So if we average that out, that's 347 divided by 22. He averaged about almost 16 points per game in the playoffs this last season. And that was on shooting 66% from the field almost. Which is super, super good. So, this was a guy that was a number 1 overall pick, right? Picked over Luka Doncic, picked over Trae Young, picked over Shea, picked over Michael Porter Jr., picked over all these guys, right? He was the number 1 pick in his draft. And a pretty key piece in this Suns roster. When we look at the roster, he's, I think, no farther down than the third guy on this roster behind Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Now, I know Mikal Bridges played a pretty crucial part this last season. As a very underrated guy on the wing for them, but to say that anybody did more than or did that much more than Ayton to be in that second position would be kind of just a lie. Now obviously when we look at what they're going to be doing this next season at the center rotation, I think there's a potential that he gets less minutes, right? Now Dario Saric, I believe, is out for the season. He might be back at some point. But they have him as kind of more of a small ball guy with playmaking. They brought in JaVale McGee to be a backup, and then we'll see if Jalen Smith can develop into something. Maybe, was just going to take him a little bit. Maybe he doesn't become anything. But still, at worst, you're looking at Deandre Ayton as really the only piece next to Devin Booker that has all-star potential. Now, I think Mikal Bridges maybe can get there. Definitely a very good player in his own right. But if he's, does he have the willingness to kind of pull himself into that more primary shot creating role? Which, if he does, you're looking at a potential Paul George level player if he can really develop that shot creation and stuff, because he's got the defense, and he's even got the shooting down. It's just kind of just that aggressiveness and learning how to just score off the dribble a lot more for him. But we know Chris Paul is locked up until he's 39 years old in the 2024-2025 season, which, some people think is a terrible contract. Some people think is an alright contract. I'm somewhere in the middle on that. I think it could develop into being a very severely bad contract for the team, but was kind of needed. They needed to do it. You make a finals run. You didn't really, you could move Cameron Payne into that starting role, but you weren't really going to, if Chris Paul left, fill that void. So you had to pay him the money. Again, Devin Booker locked up just a year before that, so he's locked up until 2023-2024, with him making 36 in that final year, and Chris Paul making 30 in his final year, his highest being that year that Devin Booker just locked up the 2023-2024 season at $30.8 million for Chris Paul. So that's two guys over 30 that season. And when we look at Ayton and his, inability to score over 20 points per game, and obviously his insane efficiency, though, that he had this last postseason, and really the chemistry that he has with Chris Paul, I think, and how I think he was very crucial to their offense, because their offense, thrived on mid-range shots, which we don't see a lot in the NBA anymore. And the thing that was so deadly with it was Devin Booker and Chris Paul could both make that mid-range, but you also had, a massive body in Deandre Ayton and an extreme lob threat in Deandre Ayton down below. So if you step up on Chris Paul or Devin Booker, they are definitely capable passers to make that pass or make the lob to Deandre Ayton to get an easy bucket, as well as if you're falling back to cover that Ayton lob, you're giving space for them. And that was what was so deadly, is they were so effective at that mid-range shot that they were just able to consistently just pretty much go to that same play where you have that screen up top. You've got Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges sitting in the corners. You've got the other guard hanging up high as well. So you have three-point shooters spreading the floor. The paint is wide open, and if you have any help defense to try and contribute to stop that mid-range shot while your big man sits back to cover Ayton, then that leaves a Jay Crowder or Mikal Bridges wide open in the corner, typically, was how that was working. And that was, Jay Crowder was, I don't know how many and one three-pointers he got from the corner three, but he got so many in the playoffs that it was starting to get ridiculous, to be honest. I was like, oh my god, this guy gets an and one on every three-pointer. And that's just kind of how it was, because you were closing out so quick to get to him, because this is a decent shooter shooting a wide open three-point shot in the NBA. He's more than likely going to make it, right? So, some nights he would shoot like 60% from three or something, because he's just getting these really open looks because that penetration from Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and then the fact that the big has to stay on Ayton no matter what, otherwise he's going to, potentially make them pay from behind, right? Now we saw the only player I think in the NBA that could have stopped that, and that was Giannis, and he did. In the finals, he was able to crucially step up on the mid-range shot and force the lob to Ayton and then recover to it, which I think, he's the only player potentially in NBA history that could have made that play, just with his size, his athleticism, his knowledge of the game. That play, I would say, is, when you look back at this last finals, that's the play you're going to take away from it, was the Giannis denial to Ayton for the dunk, right? And, this was, again, like I said, the offense and Chris Paul and Devin Booker don't have the year they had last year without Ayton. Now, does that mean that Ayton deserves to make this much money? I don't know, because I think we know that in this league anymore, unless you are a Jokic and Embiid or even a Karl Anthony Towns, you're probably at the center position a little bit expendable. Even a guy like Ayton, who was taken number one overall, there's assets to his game that you can go out and you can get for cheaper or something like that. But the thing is his potential is still super high, right? We've seen this guy get super good defensively. He came into the league and he was a minus defensively at the center position, and he's really learned how to play defense these last few years. This is a guy that has gotten better offensively, I think, every year. Now, obviously his points per game don't exactly reflect that, But again, a lot of that comes with they've had multiple coaches. So the style of play, you've had multiple different players, and not always is your points per game going to reflect what you're doing for the offense. Again, where it shows like how good of a year Chris Paul and Devin Booker had this last year, because again, that offense isn't what it was without Ayton. Now, a guy like JaVale McGee, yes, he's going to be able to catch that lob and stuff like that. And you can play that same offense with a JaVale McGee and stuff like that, but he's not the young athletic freak that Ayton is. Now, JaVale McGee's athletic in his own right, but truly Ayton's athleticism and just understanding of when he needs to go for the lob, when he just needs to dunk it, all that type of stuff down below was what helped out Chris Paul and Devin Booker a lot, along with their just deadly mid-range shooting. I mean, he doesn't have the year that he had also without that shooting. Now, if he's maybe more of a primary option, maybe he has a better year or whatever, but as that third option, he doesn't do what he did without just the ability for them to just constantly make shots. Now, when I go look at what the other extensions look like, if we head over and we look at Michael Porter Jr., this is a guy that, if it's updated here on Fanspo, I'm trying to see how much he's going to be making every season. Let's see. Because I'm wondering, do you want to pay Ayton over $30 million, right? That's kind of a question that you have to ask yourself. And when you look at Porter Jr.'s extension, so yeah, that's not updated on here. We'll go look at Luka's extension, because that should be on here. Sorry. So yeah, if you look at Luka Doncic's extension, he's a guy that by the end of his extension will be making $47 million a year. I would never pay Ayton $47 million for a season. And this extension would go out until the 2026-2027 season. So 3 years past when Devin Booker's contract will end, 2 years past when Chris Paul's contract will end. And I presume that Ayton would get the same extension if he gets that max, right? So do you really want to pay at the minimum $35 million a year for Ayton? And I think 95% of teams in the league would say no. It's just not. He does not provide enough value to say that. Even when you look at a Gobert contract, right? Now Gobert is nowhere near what Ayton is on the offensive end. But with that said, Ayton is nowhere near what Gobert is on the defensive end. Yet they still average around the same amount of points. But Gobert's a multiple-time defensive player of the year. And Gobert is, I'd consider, a terrible contract. But the Jazz, again, had to pay him, just like the Suns had to pay Chris Paul. So Ayton not being as critical to your team as a Rudy Gobert was for the Utah Jazz really gives the Phoenix Suns a lot of, I think, potential to kind of push this out and potentially get him for cheaper, because you can kind of press that against him. Now I think for Ayton it's really going to be, well, these guys are all making it and I was the top pick and we've made the finals, right? And it's going to be, look at how much I've improved every season, and I think all those things are super valid. And if he gets his money, I'm not going to root against him for getting his money, because at the end of the day, these guys are doing this as a job and you want to make as much money as possible. So if he can get his money, that's shout out to him. But I have seen some reports like, is Phoenix being cheap? And I would say completely not. Phoenix is playing this super smart, because at the end of the day, I think Mikal Bridges is probably a more valuable player to pay long term with his two-way ability. Now, not $47 million. I don't think Mikal would get that. But what I'm saying is, if you were only going to pay one of them, or if you, at this point, were looking at what was more replaceable. Now, there's a ton of 3-and-D players in the NBA as well, but the value and the potential of Mikal also getting better and being already one of the elite 3-and-D players in the league, I would pay him over $20 million a year if I was the Suns. And for Ayton, I don't know if I would push into 30 for him. Just because I don't think you'll ever see Ayton as a number one option. I'd be shocked if we ever see him truly become a number 2 option, even when Chris Paul is done, because at that point I think Mikal Bridges steps up to be that number 2, or somebody else has to, because I don't think you win with Ayton as a number 2. I think Ayton isn't quite in that elite tier, and I don't know if he'll ever be in that upper echelon of bigs in the league, where I think he'll maybe be in that second tier always, where he's super, super solid, but he needs a lot more perimeter creation. Whereas like a Joel Embiid can win you a playoff series on his own. Nikola Jokic can win you a playoff series on his own. Karl Anthony Towns, if he was in the playoffs, could probably, with some defense around him, win you a playoff series on his own. Ayton, I don't think could win you a playoff series on his own. Even a Rudy Gobert, I don't think could win you a playoff series on his own. And same with a Bam Adebayo, right? So that's kind of your second tier of centers, where Ayton already being in that category is super good for how young he is, right? Being in a category with Defensive Player of the Year players when you're not a Defensive Player of the Year, I know Bam hasn't won a Defensive Player of the Year, but he's a Defensive Player of the Year caliber player. Being in that same category with those guys is super good for you at that age, and especially with you not being you don't lean on your defensive ability as much as them, because you have more offensive skill than them, and you're just a little bit more athletic, so you're just better offensively, right? But him being in that category is super good. But again, those are guys that I don't think Gobert can be a 2 on a championship team, and I don't think Bam can be a 2, right? Now Bam can be a 3, which is why the Heat are very dangerous this year, I think. And Bam can be a 2 to go to the finals, but not win. And so that's just something that you have to really think about as the Suns, and they're playing this super smart. So if, does this open a possibility for where Ayton could leave? And if he does leave, where does he go? Now, some ideas, I think, he'll play this season at least in Phoenix, but we could see a sign and trade after the season if he enters free agency. And where I think that would go is either Phoenix is going to pay him, in that $20 million range, or you could see a sign and trade. And if you're looking at a sign and trade, I would open up the possibility as OKC. I think OKC would look at this and say, this is a guy, we don't really have a ton at the center position. This is a number 1 overall pick. This is a guy that's really shown it. We'll pay him $30 million per season. Maybe not quite that max, but we'll give him a little bit more, and we'll give you some picks back and stuff, or something like that. Or maybe we can bring in a Lou Dort as a strong perimeter defender as Chris Paul ages, where maybe you can kind of lean on him in more critical moments. I think Chris Paul's still a good defender, but, you never know, right? Father Time typically wins. So there's, definitely something. I think OKC would definitely be a destination that could be possible. I think Detroit, depending on how aggressive they would want to be, could be a possibility. Even a team like the Atlanta Hawks, would Clint Capella potentially be a better fit on this Phoenix Suns roster? Potentially. He's going to bring a little bit more defensively, not quite offensively, but he's still going to be that lob threat. And even a team like the Charlotte Hornets, where I think LaMelo Ball and DeAndre Ayton would work super well together. So they would be suitors for him in a sign and trade, multiple throughout the league, where you could try and make something happen. Even a team like the Orlando Magic. Now they've got Wendell and they've got Mo Bamba, but I think DeAndre Ayton is miles ahead of both of them and will be for his entire career. So if they wanted to pair him with potentially Jalen Suggs, or and if they get another solid pick this year and try and build something there, you can see the Magic become a suitor as well. They've got a plethora of guards, so if you wanted guard depth behind Chris Paul for as he ages, you could maybe go get an RJ Hampton, go get a Cole Anthony, or potentially a Markelle Fultz, right? And then Ayton next to a Defensive Player of the Year caliber player, and Jonathan Isaac would work super well there. So there would be a lot of trade candidates that you can get significant value out of him. And I think, teams across the league and even Phoenix knows the value he has, but Phoenix also realizes with their roster construction and with their best player going into the future, gonna be Devin Booker, that Ayton might not be the guy for them in the current state of the league. So, to be that second option. So could you maybe move in a different direction to try and make it work that way? And I think that just makes things super interesting for them. I'm wondering how many draft picks you're looking at for a, number 1 overall pick coming off of his rookie deal, only, 23, 24 maybe. let's see, by the end of his contract currently, he'll be 23 at the end of this season. He'll be 24 for the 2022-2023 season. So you'll be looking at 24-year-old potential all-star caliber player that can come in and be a number 3 on your team. And if you need talent, this is a guy you go after. So Phoenix can get a lot of value out of him, and they're playing the super smart. And I actually love this move from the GM of Phoenix to say, no, you might have been the number 1 overall pick. You might be worth this to some teams, but you're going to have to continue to earn it, and we're going to make you decide how much you really are going to get paid and if you're going to even be on the team. So, super interesting move by Phoenix, and some news that I really thought just didn't get covered enough today, and I wanted to kind of talk about. So, yeah, very, very interested to see where Ayton ends up, if he ends up leaving, and I am going to be keeping a close eye on what he does this season, because that could create a very interesting move this next offseason. So if you guys did enjoy, make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe for more. And I haven't been posting as much as I've wanted to recently. To be honest, that's all on me. I've been a little bit busy, but for the most part, I've been a little lazy on the channel. So I'm going to try and fix it. No promises, but we're going to keep grinding through this. Appreciate everybody that watched to this point. Make sure you get, if you guys haven't already, you guys subscribe for more. And yeah, I'll catch you all next time. Peace out, guys.